Derek Harrison pointed at his wife and laughed so loud the entire courtroom heard it. "Your Honor, look at her. She doesn't even have a lawyer. She's too stupid to fight back." Emma sat alone. No attorney, no files, no hope. Her husband had frozen every account, canceled every card, and hired the most vicious divorce lawyer in Manhattan. But Derek had forgotten one crucial detail about his wife's past. When those courtroom doors swung open, his laughter died in his throat. The woman who walked in wasn't just any lawyer. She was the reason Emma had run away 20 years ago. And now she was back to destroy everything Derek had built. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Derek Harrison checked his Rolex and let out a sharp laugh that echoed off the marble walls of courtroom 12. "She's late," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Or maybe she finally figured out there's no point showing up." Vincent Cole, senior partner at Cole Blackwood & Associates, didn't look up from his legal pad. He was too busy calculating his bonus from this case. "Doesn't matter if she shows Derek. We filed the emergency freeze on Monday. She has no access to a single penny. No money means no lawyer. No lawyer against me means she walks out of here with whatever scraps we decide to throw her." Derek grinned. He adjusted the cuffs of his Italian suit and leaned back in his chair like a king surveying his conquered territory. "I told you this would be easy, Vincent. I told you she was weak." Across the aisle, Emma Harrison sat completely still. She wore a gray dress she had owned for 6 years. The same dress she wore to her grandmother's funeral. The same dress she wore when she found out she couldn't have children. The same dress she now wore to bury her marriage. There were no files in front of her. No paralegal whispering strategy. No glass of water. Just Emma, her hands folded on the old wooden table, her knuckles turning white from how hard she was gripping her own fingers. Derek turned in his chair to look at her. He wanted her to see him smiling. "Hey, Emma." She didn't respond. "Emma, I'm talking to you." Still nothing. Derek's smile flickered with annoyance. He hated when she went quiet like this. During their marriage, her silence had driven him crazy. He needed reactions. He needed to see his words land. "You know what your problem is," Derek said, raising his voice so the scattered spectators in the back could hear. "You always thought you were better than everyone, walking around with your paintings and your charity work like you were some kind of saint. But look at you now, sitting there with nothing, no money, no lawyer, no future." Vincent put a hand on Derek's arm. "Save it for the proceedings." "No, she needs to hear this." Derek shook off his lawyer's hand. "I gave you everything, Emma. The penthouse, the cars, the lifestyle. And how did you repay me by trying to leave? By embarrassing me in front of my colleagues." Emma finally looked at him. Her eyes were red, but she wasn't crying. She had run out of tears 3 months ago, the night Derek threw her phone in the toilet and told her if she ever tried to call her friends again, he would make her regret it. "I repaid you," Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper, "by staying 11 years longer than I should have." Derek's face twisted with rage. He started to stand, but the bailiff's sharp voice cut through the tension. "All rise. The Honorable Judge Patricia Morrison presiding." The room shuffled to its feet. Judge Morrison swept in her black robes, flowing behind her. She was a woman in her early 60s, known throughout the Manhattan court system for 2 things, her photographic memory and her absolute intolerance for theatrics. She took her seat and opened the file in front of her. "Be seated." She scanned the documents. Case number 24, DV 0847, Harrison versus Harrison. Preliminary hearing on asset division and the respondent's petition for spousal support. Judge Morrison looked at Vincent Cole. "Mr. Cole, I see we're in a hurry today. You've filed 3 emergency motions in the past week." Vincent stood smoothly. "Your Honor, my client is eager to resolve this matter efficiently. The marriage has been over for some time. We see no reason to prolong the proceedings." "Efficiently," the judge repeated. She turned her gaze to Emma's table. Her frown deepened. "Mrs. Harrison, you appear to be unrepresented. Is counsel on the way? Emma stood. Her legs felt unsteady, but she forced herself to stay upright. Yes, Your Honor. She should be here any moment. There was an issue with traffic, Derek interrupted loudly. Let me guess. Traffic. That's always the excuse, isn't it, Emma? Judge Morrison's eyes snapped to Derek. Mr. Harrison, you will not speak unless addressed. One more outburst, and I will hold you in contempt. Derek raised his hands in mock surrender. My apologies, Your Honor. I'm just frustrated. My wife has had months to prepare. The fact that she can't even secure basic representation shows exactly the kind of person she is. Mr. Harrison. The judge's voice dropped to a dangerous register. What did I just say? Vincent stood quickly. Your Honor, I apologize for my client. But his point, while inelegantly made, is valid. We're wasting the court's time. Mrs. Harrison clearly has not retained counsel. Under Williams v. State, we move to proceed with a default ruling on asset division. Judge Morrison looked at Emma. She looked tired, the kind of tired that comes from seeing the same sad story play out 1,000 times. Mrs. Harrison, Mr. Cole is technically correct. If you cannot produce an attorney immediately, I'll have to assume you're representing yourself pro se. Given the complexity of your husband's financial portfolio, that would be inadvisable. I'm not representing myself, Emma said. Her eyes were fixed on the mahogany doors at the back of the room. Please, just 2 more minutes. She's coming. Derek let out a theatrical sigh. She's stalling, Your Honor. She has nobody. Her father cut her off years ago. Her friends are all housewives who think a legal strategy is watching Law and Order reruns. Who is she going to call her dead mother? The word hung in the air like a slap. Emma flinched. Her mother. The mother she had told Derek died when Emma was 19. The mother she had erased from her life to escape the crushing weight of expectations. The mother she had called sobbing 3 days ago for the first time in 2 decades. Mr. Cole? Judge Morrison said, her patience clearly exhausted. Control your client. Mrs. Harrison, I'm sorry, but we cannot wait indefinitely. I'm going to have to... Bang! The sound exploded through the courtroom like a gunshot. The double doors at the back didn't just open. They were thrown wide with enough force to rattle the hinges. Every head in the room turned. Derek spun around, annoyed at the interruption. What he saw made his smirk vanish instantly. Standing in the doorway was not a frazzled public defender running late from another case. Standing there was a woman who looked like she had stepped out of a Fortune 500 boardroom. Late 60s. Silver hair cut into a sharp bob that framed her face like a blade. She wore a white suit that probably cost more than Derek's car payment. Her posture was military straight, her eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses that she slowly removed to reveal irises of piercing ice blue. Behind her walked 3 younger attorneys in perfect formation, each carrying thick leather briefcases, moving like a military escort. The woman didn't rush. She walked down the center aisle with the measured pace of someone who had never once in her life been told to hurry. Click, click, click. Her heels struck the marble floor like a countdown. Vincent Cole dropped his pen. It clattered against the table, but he didn't seem to notice. His face had gone the color of old milk. No, Vincent whispered. The word came out strangled. That's impossible. Derek looked at his lawyer with confusion. What? Who is she? What's wrong with you? Vincent didn't answer. His hands were shaking. The woman reached the front of the courtroom. She walked past Emma without a glance and placed a gold-embossed business card on the stenographer's desk. Then she turned to face the judge. My apologies for the delay, Your Honor. Her voice was smooth-cultured and carried to every corner of the room without effort. Filing a few emergency motions with the federal court regarding Mr. Harrison's offshore accounts took longer than expected. Listing all of them was quite tedious. Derek's blood went cold. Offshore accounts. How did she know about Judge Morrison? Leaned forward. Even she looked slightly stunned. "Counselor, state your name for the record." The woman straightened her already perfect posture. "Margaret Ashworth, Senior Managing Partner at Ashworth Crown in Sterling, Washington, D.C. I am entering my appearance as counsel for the respondent Emma Harrison." She paused. Then she turned and looked directly at Derek with eyes that held absolutely no warmth. "I am also her mother." The silence that followed was absolute. Derek's mouth opened and closed like a fish pulled from water. He looked at Emma. He looked at this terrifying woman in white. He looked back at Emma. "Mother?" Derek finally managed. "You said your mother was dead. You told me she died when you were 19. You said—" "I said she was gone from my life," Emma said quietly. "I never said she was dead." Margaret Ashworth walked around the defense table and took the seat next to her daughter. She didn't embrace Emma. Not yet. This was business. She placed her briefcase on the table and snapped it open with 2 sharp clicks. "My daughter left home 20 years ago to escape the pressure of my world," Margaret said, her voice carrying through the silent courtroom. "She wanted a simple life. She wanted to be loved for who she was, not for the Ashworth name." Margaret turned her gaze to Vincent Cole. The opposing lawyer looked like he was trying to disappear into his chair. "Hello, Vincent," Margaret said pleasantly. "I haven't seen you since the Morrison Tech litigation in 2017. You were barely a junior associate then, weren't you? Fetching documents for the actual attorneys?" Vincent's face flushed deep red. He cleared his throat. "Ms. Ashworth, I didn't realize you were admitted in New York." "I'm admitted in New York, California, D.C., and before the International Court of Justice at The Hague." Margaret's voice was conversational, almost friendly. "I generally handle constitutional law and billion-dollar corporate mergers. I've argued 14 cases before the Supreme Court." She paused, letting the silence stretch. "But when my daughter called me sobbing at 2 in the morning, telling me that a mid-level investment banker with a God complex was trying to destroy her life, I decided to make an exception." Derek shot to his feet. "This is ridiculous. She can't just walk in here and—" "Sit down, Mr. Harrison." Judge Morrison's voice cracked like a whip. Derek sat. Margaret pulled a thick folder from her briefcase and handed it to the bailiff. "Your Honor, Mr. Cole claims my client has no assets and no representation. Both claims are now moot. Furthermore, Mr. Harrison claims the marital assets, specifically the penthouse on Central Park West, the Southampton estate, and the investment portfolio at Goldman Sachs are his sole property protected by a prenuptial agreement signed 11 years ago." Margaret smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "That prenuptial agreement is invalid." Derek's voice cracked. "It's ironclad. She signed it. Her signature is right there on the Mr. Harrison." Margaret turned to face him. "Do you know who drafted the standard template for spousal coercion clauses used in New York State family courts?" Derek blinked. "What?" "I did. In 1994. I wrote the legislation that defines exactly what constitutes coercion when signing a marital contract." Margaret opened another folder. "According to the sworn affidavit my daughter provided this morning on the night before your wedding, you told her that if she didn't sign the prenuptial agreement, you would tell her dying grandmother that Emma had been lying about finishing her art degree. You said, and I quote from the text message you sent her that night, 'Sign it, or I tell everyone what a fraud you really are, including Grandma. Let's see if the stress kills her faster.'" The courtroom erupted in gasps. "That's a lie!" Derek screamed, jumping to his feet again. "She's lying, I never—" "We recovered the messages from the cloud backup you thought you deleted," Margaret continued calmly. "Exhibit C, Your Honor. Page 47. Along with 17 other messages from the same month documenting a pattern of emotional manipulation and financial threats." Judge Morrison was flipping through the documents, her expression growing darker with each page. Vincent Cole scrambled to his feet. "Your Honor, we haven't had time to review this evidence. This is ambush litigation. We need a continuance to an ambush." Margaret laughed. The sound was cold and sharp. "Mr. Cole, 15 minutes ago, you were trying to push through a default judgment against a woman with no lawyer while your client openly mocked her in open court. You don't get to complain about fairness." Margaret straightened her jacket. "Now, let's discuss the money." She pulled out a second binder, this one even thicker than the first. "Mr. Harrison claims his net worth is approximately $8 million, a respectable sum for a man of his limited talents." Derek's face contorted with rage, but he stayed seated this time. "However," Margaret dropped the binder on the table with a heavy thud. "My forensic accounting team spent the past 48 hours tracing an intricate network of shell companies Mr. Harrison established in the Cayman Islands, Cyprus, and the British Virgin Islands." She flipped open the binder. "The total hidden assets are not $8 million, Mr. Harrison." Margaret leaned forward, her face inches from Derek's. "It's $26 million, and since you failed to disclose any of it on your financial affidavit signed under penalty of perjury this morning," Margaret smiled at Judge Morrison, "that constitutes felony fraud." Derek slumped back in his chair. All the color had drained from his face. He looked at Vincent, desperate. "Do something," Derek hissed. "You're supposed to be the best. Do something." Vincent Cole was staring at the binder full of evidence. He was staring at the judge, who was now looking at Derek like he was something she'd found on the bottom of her shoe. Then he looked at Margaret Ashworth, the most feared litigator of her generation, the woman they called the Iron Verdict. Vincent slowly began packing his briefcase. "Your Honor," Vincent said, his voice hollow, "I need to request a brief recess to confer with my client." "Request denied," Judge Morrison said immediately. "We're just getting started, Mr. Cole. Please, sit down." Margaret walked back to her seat next to Emma. For the first time, Emma looked up at her mother. Really looked at her. This woman she had run from. This woman she had feared. This woman who had just walked into her darkest hour like an avenging angel. Margaret reached over and squeezed Emma's hand. Just once. Brief. But Emma felt it all the way to her bones. "It's okay," Margaret whispered so softly only Emma could hear. "I've got you now." Across the aisle, Derek Harrison was beginning to understand that the woman he had called weak was about to become the architect of his complete destruction, and this was only the beginning. Margaret Ashworth stood up slowly, buttoning her white jacket with deliberate precision. She looked at Judge Morrison, then at the stenographer, then finally at Derek Harrison, who was gripping the edge of his table like a man trying not to drown. "Your Honor," Margaret said, "I would like to call Derek Harrison to the stand as a hostile witness." Derek's head snapped toward Vincent Cole. "Can she do that? I'm the plaintiff. Can she just—" "You filed for divorce," Vincent whispered harshly. "You're a party to this case. She can call you. Get up there and for God's sake don't lie. She knows everything." "I'm not going up there. I refuse." Judge Morrison's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Mr. Harrison, you will take the stand or I will hold you in contempt. Your choice, the stand or a holding cell." Derek stood. His legs felt like they were filled with sand. He walked to the witness box, each step heavier than the last. The bailiff swore him in, and Derek sat down trying to compose himself. He was Derek Harrison. He had closed deals worth hundreds of millions. He had stared down CEOs and board members. This woman was just Emma's mother, an old woman in a white suit. He could handle this. Margaret approached the podium. She didn't bring any notes. She didn't bring any files. She just rested her hands on the wood and looked at Derek the way a scientist looks at a specimen. "Mr. Harrison," Margaret began, her voice almost friendly. "Let's start with something simple. You mentioned earlier that my daughter was disorganized, that she didn't understand money. Is that correct?" Derek cleared his throat. "That's right. Emma is a dreamer. She paints pictures. She volunteers at animal shelters. She doesn't understand complex financial instruments. So you handled all the finances in the marriage. Someone had to." "Someone had to," Margaret repeated thoughtfully. Is that why you purchased a condominium in Miami Beach on February 14th of this year, the one listed under Harrison Holdings LLC? Derek blinked. That was an investment property for our portfolio. For our portfolio, Margaret echoed. Strange, because according to the credit card statements linked to that property statements you attempted to shred, but which your assistant, a young woman named Jessica Torres, forgot to remove from the digital backup server you purchased, nursery furniture. A crib, a changing table, a mobile with little elephants on it. Emma's hand flew to her mouth. Derek's face went gray. That was staging. For resale value. Condos in Miami sell better with staging. Margaret nodded slowly. And the diamond tennis bracelet purchased from Tiffany's 3 days later, was that also for staging? Or was that for the woman currently living in the Miami condo? Objection. By. Vincent Cole was on his feet, though he looked like he'd rather be anywhere else on earth. Your Honor, relevance. New York is a no-fault divorce state. Infidelity doesn't impact asset division. It does when marital funds were used to facilitate it. Judge Morrison ruled immediately. Overruled. Answer the question, Mr. Harrison. Derek gripped the railing of the witness box. His knuckles went white. I don't know what she's talking about. Margaret smiled. It was the smile of a predator who had just tasted blood in the water. You don't. That's fine. We'll come back to Natalie later. Derek flinched at the name. Emma watched her husband flinch, and something inside her cracked open. Natalie. The woman had a name. The woman Derek had been sleeping with while Emma clipped coupons and canceled her own doctor's appointments because Derek said they couldn't afford unnecessary expenses. The woman had a name, and that name was Natalie. Let's move on to your company, Margaret continued. Apex Capital Partners. You testified in your sworn affidavit that your income last year was $400,000. Is that correct? That's correct, Derek said quickly. The market was volatile. Returns were down across the board. The market was volatile. Margaret turned to face Judge Morrison. Your Honor, I have here certified bank records from First Caribbean International Bank in the Cayman Islands. They show a wire transfer of $2.3 million entering an account controlled by Apex Capital Partners on March 15th of last year, the same day Mr. Harrison claims the market was, quote, volatile. She held up a document. And here is the corresponding withdrawal record. Mr. Harrison, can you tell the court what you used that $2.3 million for? Derek said nothing. His throat had closed up. I'll help you, Margaret said pleasantly. You purchased cryptocurrency, specifically an untraceable privacy coin that you stored on a cold storage hardware wallet. That wallet is currently sitting in a safety deposit box at the Chase Bank branch on 57th Street, box number 1947. Derek's jaw dropped. How did you... I'm Margaret Ashworth, she said simply. Finding hidden money is what I do. Now here's the problem, Mr. Harrison. You didn't declare that $2.3 million on your financial disclosure. You didn't mention the cryptocurrency, and you certainly didn't share any of it with your wife. Margaret leaned in close, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the silent courtroom. You mocked my daughter for not having a lawyer. You called her pathetic in front of this entire court. But the only pathetic thing in this room is a grown man who steals millions of dollars, hides it in an offshore box, and then parades his pregnant girlfriend around Miami while his wife skips meals to pay the electric bill. I didn't steal anything. Derek exploded, cracking under the pressure. It's my money, I earned it. She just sat at home painting worthless pictures. She didn't contribute anything. Why should she get half of what I built? The courtroom went dead silent. Judge Morrison stared at Derek with undisguised contempt. Mr. Harrison, the judge said slowly, did you just admit on the record that the money exists and that you intentionally concealed it to prevent your wife from receiving her equitable share? Derek looked at the judge. He looked at Vincent, who had his face buried in his hands. He looked at Emma, who was staring at him like she was seeing him clearly for the first time. That's not what I... No further questions for this witness, Margaret said, turning her back on him. She walked to her seat and sat down next to Emma with the calm satisfaction of a chess master who had just declared checkmate. Derek stumbled down from the witness stand. His expensive suit suddenly felt cheap. His Rolex felt like a shackle. He collapsed into his chair and grabbed Vincent's arm. "Fix this," Derek hissed. "Object to something. Say the evidence was obtained illegally. Do your job." Vincent Cole was already packing his briefcase. "What are you doing?" Derek's voice pitched higher with panic. "We're in the middle of the hearing." Vincent stood up. He straightened his tie. He didn't look at Derek. "Your Honor," Vincent said, his voice flat. "At this time, I must respectfully move to withdraw as counsel for the plaintiff." Derek shot to his feet. "You can't quit. I paid you $75,000. "Mr. Cole?" Judge Morrison said, her eyebrows raised. "We are in the middle of proceedings. This is highly irregular. Your Honor, an ethical conflict has arisen that makes it impossible for me to continue representing this client." Vincent chose his words with surgical precision. "As an officer of the court, I cannot suborn perjury. Based on the testimony my client just provided under oath, my continued representation would compromise my professional obligations." The translation was clear to everyone in the room. He lied. He got caught. "I'm not going down with him." "You coward!" Derek lunged across the table and grabbed Vincent by the lapels. I referred 3 clients to your firm last year. You owe me." "Bailiff," Judge Morrison shouted. Officer Martinez, a stocky man with 20 years of experience handling exactly this type of situation, moved fast. He grabbed Derek by the back of his collar and slammed him back into his seat with enough force to rattle the table. "Touch your attorney again, and you're spending the night in lookup," Martinez growled. "Sit down and shut up." Derek sat. He was breathing hard, his tie askew, his hair falling into his eyes. For the first time, Emma saw him without his armor, without his money, without his power. He was just a scared man who had finally been caught. Judge Morrison glared at Vincent Cole. "Mr. Cole, I am not granting your withdrawal at this time. You will remain as counsel of record until these proceedings conclude. After that, you can file whatever motions you wish, but you are not abandoning your client in the middle of my courtroom." Vincent's face fell, but he nodded curtly. "Yes, Your Honor." He sat back down, moving his chair several feet away from Derek. Margaret Ashworth watched this display with detached amusement. She straightened the papers in front of her and stood again. "Your Honor, since opposing counsel is still technically present, I would like to call my next witness. This witness speaks to character and intent, specifically regarding Mr. Harrison's conduct during the marriage and his stated goals for this divorce proceeding." "Call your witness," Judge Morrison said. Margaret turned toward the back of the courtroom. "I call Natalie Chen." Derek's head snapped up so fast, Emma heard his neck crack. "No," he breathed. "She wouldn't." The courtroom doors opened. A young woman walked in. She was beautiful, early 30s, with long dark hair and flawless makeup. She wore a conservative navy dress clearly chosen to project respectability. But her hands were shaking, and she wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. She walked past Derek's table without looking at him. "Natalie." Derek reached out as she passed. "Baby, don't do this. Whatever she promised you, I can double it. I can..." Natalie flinched away from his hand like his touch burned her. She took the stand. The bailiff swore her in. She sat with her hands clasped in her lap, her knuckles white. Margaret approached the witness box gently. Her demeanor had shifted. She was no longer the predator circling prey. Now she was almost maternal. "Ms. Chen," Margaret said softly, "thank you for being here. I know this isn't easy. Can you tell the court your relationship to Derek Harrison?" Natalie took a shaky breath. I was his girlfriend. For about 2 years. Was, Margaret asked. Yes. Natalie's voice gained a fraction of strength. I ended it this morning. And why did you end the relationship this morning? Natalie finally looked up. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but beneath the tears was something harder. Anger. Because Ms. Ashworth showed me the text messages Derek sent to his other girlfriend, the one in Chicago. The courtroom erupted. Spectators gasped. Someone in the back actually said, "Oh my God," out loud. Order. Judge Morrison banged her gavel. Order in this court. Derek was shaking his head frantically. She's lying. There's no one in Chicago. Natalie, tell them you're confused. Tell them, Mr. Harrison. The judge's voice cracked like a whip. One more word and I will have you removed. Derek clamped his mouth shut, but his eyes were wild, darting between Natalie and Margaret, like a trapped animal looking for escape. Margaret continued calmly. Ms. Chen, during your relationship with Mr. Harrison, did he ever discuss his wife Emma? All the time. Natalie's voice was steadier now. He talked about her constantly. What did he say? He said she was crazy, unstable. He said she was a burden who didn't appreciate everything he did for her. Natalie paused, her jaw tightening. He said he was going to destroy her in the divorce. He bragged about it. He called his lawyer the Crusher and said Emma was too stupid to defend herself. Margaret let the words hang in the air. Did he say anything else about his intentions for the divorce? Natalie looked at Emma for the first time. Her expression was complicated, a mixture of guilt and pity, and something that might have been sisterhood. He said he was going to leave her with nothing. He said she would be homeless within 6 months, and then she would come crawling back to him begging for help. Natalie's voice cracked. He said he wanted to own her. Those were his exact words. He said once she was broke and desperate, she would finally understand who was in charge. Emma felt the tears streaming down her face, but she didn't wipe them away. All those years of being told she was too sensitive, too emotional, too paranoid. All those years of being gaslit into believing she was the problem. She wasn't crazy. She had never been crazy. He was just cruel. Ms. Chen, Margaret said gently. One more question. Did Mr. Harrison ever tell you why he was so determined to hurt his wife? Did he give a reason? Natalie nodded slowly. He said it was because she tried to leave him 3 years ago. She packed a bag and drove to her friend's house in Connecticut. He convinced her to come back. Promised things would be different. Natalie's voice dropped. He told me he had been planning this ever since. 3 years of planning. He said no one leaves Derek Harrison. He said he would rather burn everything down than let her walk away with a single penny. Margaret turned to face Emma. Their eyes met. In that moment, Emma understood something that had eluded her for over a decade. Her mother hadn't been cold all those years ago. Her mother hadn't been heartless or controlling or impossible to please. Her mother had been preparing her for a world full of men like Derek. And Emma had run away from that preparation straight into a predator's arms. No further questions, Margaret said softly. Judge Morrison looked at Vincent Cole. Cross-examination. Vincent didn't even stand. No questions, Your Honor. Natalie stepped down from the witness box. She walked toward the back of the courtroom, but halfway there she stopped at Emma's table. I'm sorry, Natalie whispered. I didn't know. I believed everything he said about you. I thought... She trailed off. I'm just sorry. Emma looked at this young woman who had been sleeping with her husband, and she felt something unexpected. Not anger, not hatred, pity. He fooled me for 11 years, Emma said quietly. You only had 2. That doesn't make you the villain, Natalie. It makes you another victim. Natalie's eyes filled with tears. She nodded once, then walked out of the courtroom without looking back. Judge Morrison removed her glasses and cleaned them with a cloth, taking her time. When she finally spoke, her voice was dangerously low. Mr. Harrison, in 22 years on this bench, I have seen some truly reprehensible behavior. I have seen couples fight over pets, over photo albums, over who gets the Christmas ornaments. But I have rarely witnessed a display of calculated cruelty quite like this. Derek didn't look up. He was staring at the table like a man watching his whole life collapse into a sinkhole. You came into my courtroom, the judge continued, and you mocked the judicial process. You mocked your wife. You lied under oath. You attempted to weaponize this court as an instrument of abuse against a woman you swore to love and protect. Judge Morrison turned to Emma. Her expression softened slightly. Mrs. Harrison, I owe you an apology. The court should have seen through this sooner. We failed you. Emma nodded, unable to speak. However, Judge Morrison said, her voice hardening again as she turned back to Derek. I am now in a position to rectify that failure. She picked up her pen. I am issuing a temporary order effective immediately. The final judgment will follow once Ms. Ashworth's team completes a comprehensive forensic audit of all assets connected to Mr. Harrison. She began writing. First, all assets belonging to Derek Harrison, Apex Capital Partners, and any associated entities are hereby frozen. Access is granted solely to Mrs. Harrison and her legal counsel for the purpose of investigation and documentation. Derek made a choking sound. Second, I am awarding Mrs. Harrison immediate exclusive use and occupancy of the marital residence on Central Park West and the Southampton property. Mr. Harrison, you have until 5 o'clock this evening to vacate both properties. You may take your clothing and personal hygiene items. Nothing else. If you remove a single piece of furniture, a single work of art, or a single kitchen utensil, I will have you arrested for contempt and theft. Your Honor, Derek started. I'm not finished. Judge Morrison didn't even look at him. Third, I am referring the complete transcript of today's hearing to the Manhattan District Attorney's Office for investigation of potential charges, including but not limited to perjury, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Mr. Cole, I strongly suggest you encourage your client to cooperate fully with any investigation if he wishes to avoid additional charges. Vincent Cole nodded weakly. Yes, Your Honor. Fourth, Mr. Harrison will pay 100% of Mrs. Harrison's legal fees. Ms. Ashworth, given your firm's standard hourly rate, I imagine that will be substantial. Margaret smiled pleasantly. Very substantial, Your Honor. Fifth, and finally. Judge Morrison set down her pen and looked directly at Derek. A temporary restraining order is hereby issued. Mr. Harrison, you are prohibited from coming within 500 feet of Mrs. Harrison, her residence, her workplace, or any location she is known to frequent. You are prohibited from contacting her by phone, email, text message, social media, or through any third party. Violation of this order will result in immediate arrest. She picked up her gavel. Court is adjourned until 9 a.m. Monday morning for the continuation of asset proceedings. We are done here today. The gavel came down with a crack that seemed to echo forever. The courtroom slowly began to empty. Spectators filed out, many of them still whispering about what they had witnessed. The law clerks were already texting their friends. By tonight, this hearing would be the talk of every bar association gathering in Manhattan. Derek sat motionless in his chair. His face had gone slack like a puppet whose strings had been cut. Everything he had built, everything he had schemed for, gone in less than 2 hours. He watched Emma and her mother gathering their papers. He watched them speaking quietly, their heads close together. He watched Emma smile at something Margaret said, a genuine smile, the kind of smile he hadn't seen on her face in years. Something in Derek's chest twisted, not remorse. Derek Harrison wasn't capable of remorse. What he felt was rage. Pure incandescent rage at being outmaneuvered, at being humiliated, at being made to look like the villain when all he had done was protect what was rightfully his. He stood up abruptly. Emma? His voice came out rougher than he intended. Emma turned. Margaret immediately stepped between them, but Emma put a hand on her mother's arm. It's okay, Mom. Let me hear what he has to say. Margaret didn't move, but she didn't advance either. Her eyes stayed locked on Derek like a hawk watching a snake. Derek walked toward them, stopping just outside arm's reach. Officer Martinez tensed, ready to intervene. "Emma, this doesn't have to be war." Derek tried to make his voice soft, reasonable, the voice he used when he was closing a difficult deal. "We can still settle this like adults. Your mother is clearly very talented, but this kind of scorched earth approach, it benefits no one. Think about what we built together. 11 years. We can divide things fairly without destroying each other." Emma looked at her husband. She studied his face, this face she had woken up next to for over a decade. She knew every expression, every manipulation, every lie. "Derek," Emma said quietly, "do you remember what you said to me on our 5th anniversary?" Derek blinked, thrown by the question. No. What does that have to do with—" "You said that you would rather watch me starve than let me leave with a single dollar of your money." Emma's voice was calm, almost peaceful. "You said it at dinner at Le Bernardin, right after the champagne arrived. You said it smiling like it was a joke. But your eyes weren't joking, Derek. Your eyes never joke." Derek's face hardened. The mask slipped just for a moment. "You should have listened," he said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "I gave you a chance to walk away with something. Now you get nothing." Margaret stepped forward, putting herself directly in front of Derek. "My daughter already has everything she needs, Mr. Harrison. She has her freedom. She has her dignity. And as of today, she has the full resources of one of the largest litigation firms in the country, dedicated to ensuring you never hurt anyone again." Margaret smiled, and this time the smile reached her eyes. "Enjoy your evening, Derek. I hear the Hampton Inn in Queens has reasonable rates. You might want to book now. It's a busy season." She took Emma's arm and guided her daughter toward the exit. Derek watched them go. He watched the heavy wooden doors swing shut behind them. Then he turned and looked at the empty courtroom. The judge was gone. The bailiff was gone. Even Vincent Cole had slipped out while Derek wasn't watching. Derek Harrison was alone. He pulled out his phone and called Natalie. The call went straight to voicemail. He called his assistant Jessica. Voicemail. He called his golf buddy Marcus, who was also his accountant. The phone rang once, then was declined. Word was already spreading. Derek sank back into his chair. The courtroom was silent, except for the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Each tick sounded like a nail being driven into a coffin. His coffin. Outside, the sun was beginning to set over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. It should have been beautiful. Instead, Derek could only think about how he had 4 hours to pack 11 years of life into whatever suitcases he could carry. His phone buzzed. A text message. It was from his building's doorman, "Mr. Harrison. There are 2 federal marshals here asking about you. Should I send them up?" Derek stared at the message. Then he put his head down on the table and did something he hadn't done since he was 7 years old. He cried. But in the back of his mind, even through the tears, a small dark voice was already planning. Already scheming. This wasn't over. He would find a way. He always found a way. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the courthouse steps as Emma and Margaret walked out into the crisp Manhattan air. Emma took a deep breath, filling her lungs for what felt like the first time in 11 years. "I can't believe it's over," Emma whispered. Margaret squeezed her daughter's arm. "It's not over yet, sweetheart. We still have the full asset hearing on Monday. But the hard part is done. He can't hurt you anymore." Emma turned to look at her mother. This woman she had run from. This woman she had blamed for every pressure, every expectation, every moment of feeling not good enough. This woman who had just walked into a courtroom and dismantled her husband's entire life in under 2 hours. "Mom, I'm sorry." Margaret's eyebrows rose slightly. "For what? For leaving, for cutting you off, for 20 years of silence." Emma's voice cracked. "I thought you were the enemy. I thought if I could just get away from you, from the Ashworth name, from everything you represented, I would finally be free to be myself." Margaret was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer than Emma had ever heard it. "You weren't entirely wrong, Emma. I was hard on you. Too hard. I saw so much potential, and I pushed too much. I wanted to prepare you for a world full of people who would try to use you, manipulate you, break you down." She paused. "I never imagined you would run straight into the arms of exactly the kind of man I was trying to protect you from." "How did you know?" Emma asked. "When I called you 3 days ago, how did you know it was this bad?" Margaret smiled sadly. "Because you called. In 20 years you never once reached out. Not for holidays. Not when your grandmother died. Not for anything. When your name appeared on my phone at 2 in the morning, I knew it had to be catastrophic." Emma wiped her eyes. "I didn't know who else to call. He froze everything. I couldn't even buy groceries. I was sleeping in my car because he changed the locks on the apartment, and I couldn't afford a hotel. I thought—" She trailed off. "You thought what?" "I thought you would say I told you so. I thought you would hang up on me." Margaret reached out and cupped her daughter's face in her hands. Her eyes, those same ice-blue eyes that had terrified opposing counsel for 4 decades, were now filled with tears. "Emma, you are my daughter. My only child. There is nothing you could ever do. No mistake you could ever make that would stop me from coming when you call. Do you understand nothing?" Emma nodded, unable to speak. "Now," Margaret said, releasing her daughter and straightening her jacket. "We have a lot of work to do before Monday. My team has already started the forensic audit, but there are documents we need from the penthouse. Personal records. Bank statements Derek might have hidden. Are you up for going home?" Emma took another deep breath. Home. The penthouse on Central Park West that she had lived in for 8 years, but had never felt like hers. The place where Derek had controlled every aspect of her existence, down to what she ate for breakfast. "Yes," Emma said. "I'm ready." They started walking toward the black town car waiting at the curb. One of Margaret's junior associates, a young man named Thomas, was already holding the door open. That's when the second car pulled up. It was a sleek black Mercedes polished to a mirror shine. The windows were tinted so dark Emma couldn't see inside. But she didn't need to see inside. She recognized that car. She had ridden in that car exactly twice in her life, both times feeling like she was being transported to her own execution. The rear door opened. A man stepped out. He was in his early 70s, but he moved like someone 20 years younger. Silver hair swept back from a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. Cold gray eyes that seemed to calculate the value of everything they looked at, including people. Especially people. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost as much as a new car, and he carried himself with the absolute certainty of a man who had never once been told no. Emma's blood turned to ice. "Dad?" Margaret stopped walking. Her entire body went rigid. Her hand tightened on Emma's arm with enough force to leave bruises. "Hello, Margaret." The man's voice was deep, commanding, the kind of voice that filled boardrooms and silenced dissent. "It's been a while." "Charles." Margaret's voice could have frozen the Hudson River. "What are you doing here?" Charles Ashworth, founder and CEO of Ashworth Capital Management, one of the largest private equity firms on the East Coast, smiled pleasantly. It was the smile of a shark. "I saw the news alerts. My daughter's name trending on legal Twitter. The iron verdict returns to crush a cheating husband. Very dramatic." He looked at Emma. "Hello, sweetheart. You look thin. Are you eating?" Emma couldn't find words. She hadn't seen her father since her wedding day 11 years ago. The day he had walked her down the aisle, handed her off to Derek like a business transaction, and whispered in her ear, "Try not to disappoint this one." "What do you want, Charles?" Margaret demanded. "I want to talk to my daughter." Is that so strange? You haven't spoken to your daughter in over a decade. You didn't call when her grandmother died. You didn't call when she was hospitalized for exhaustion 2 years ago. You don't get to show up now and pretend you're father of the year. Charles's pleasant expression didn't waver. I'm not here to pretend anything, Margaret. I'm here because there's a problem. What problem? Charles reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document. He handed it to Margaret. 6 months ago, your daughter's soon-to-be ex-husband came to me with a business proposition. He needed capital for a new venture. Something about cryptocurrency arbitrage. I don't particularly care about the details. What I care about is the collateral he offered. Margaret unfolded the document. Her eyes scanned the text. Emma watched her mother's face go pale. No, Margaret whispered. What? Emma stepped closer. Mom, what is it? Margaret looked up at Charles. Her voice was deadly quiet. You gave him a $2 million loan against the penthouse. It was a sound investment. The property is worth at least $8 million. Even if he defaulted, I would come out ahead. You knew, Margaret said slowly. You knew he was hiding assets. You knew he was planning to divorce Emma. And you gave him money anyway. Charles shrugged. Business is business. Derek came to me with a solid proposal. I didn't ask about his marital situation. That's not my concern. Emma felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. She had just won. She had just gotten everything back. And now, her own father was going to take it away. The penthouse is mine, Emma said, her voice shaking. The judge awarded it to me. You can't. The judge awarded you occupancy, Charles corrected. But according to this loan agreement, if Derek defaults on the first payment, which he did yesterday, the property reverts to me as collateral. I'm calling the note due immediately. He looked at his daughter with the same cold calculation he applied to every business deal. I'm sorry, Emma. But that apartment belongs to me now. You'll have to find somewhere else to stay. Emma felt tears burning in her eyes. Not tears of sadness, tears of rage. This man who had never once been a real father. This man who had valued business connections over his own daughter's happiness. This man who had pushed her toward Derek in the first place because the Harrison family had potential. You introduced me to him, Emma said, her voice low and dangerous. At the charity gala 12 years ago, you said he was a rising star. You said he came from good stock. You practically gift-wrapped me and handed me over. Charles's expression flickered just for a moment. I introduced you to a lot of young men at that gala. What you did with the introductions was your choice. My choice? Emma laughed bitterly. Every time I tried to break up with him, you called me. You said I was being foolish. You said Derek was the best I was ever going to do. You said the Ashworth name deserves better than some starving artist crying about her feelings. Emma. No. Emma stepped forward, getting in her father's face for the first time in her life. You don't get to do this. You don't get to profit off my pain. Not this time. Charles looked at his daughter with something that might have been surprise. The thin, broken woman he had dismissed for years was gone. In her place was someone he didn't recognize. Someone with fire in her eyes. Emma, Charles said carefully. I understand you're upset, but this is business. The loan papers are legally binding. Derek put up the property as collateral. He defaulted. The property is mine. It's simple mathematics. Actually, Margaret said, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. It's not quite that simple. Charles turned to his ex-wife. Excuse me. Margaret was smiling now. It was the same smile she had given Derek right before she destroyed him on the witness stand. The same smile that had earned her the nickname Iron Verdict. Did you conduct a proper title search before you accepted this collateral, Charles? Or did you just take Derek's word for it? Charles's eyes narrowed. My team did a preliminary review. The property is titled in Derek's name. The property is titled in the name that Derek showed you. Margaret pulled out her phone and tapped a few buttons. But if your team had actually checked the county clerk's records, they would have seen the amendment filed in 2019. She held up her phone, showing Charles the screen. When Emma was pregnant before the miscarriage, I convinced Derek to transfer the property into a family trust. It was a tax protection strategy. He agreed because he's greedy and hates paying taxes. But he didn't read the trust bylaws carefully. Margaret's smile widened. The trust stipulates that any use of the property as collateral requires the signature of both beneficiaries. Emma never signed your loan agreement, did she? Charles? Charles grabbed the phone and stared at the document. His face went gray. He forged it. Emma whispered, understanding dawning. He forged my signature on the loan documents. Exactly. Margaret took back her phone. So, here's your situation, Charles. You're holding a loan agreement based on forged documents secured by property that was never legally available as collateral. That makes your contract void. Completely and totally void. Charles was silent for a long moment. Emma could see him calculating the way he always calculated. Weighing options. Assessing risks. If the contract is void, Charles said slowly, then I have no claim on the property. Correct. Which means I'm out $2 million with no collateral. Also correct. That bastard, Charles growled. He scammed me, his own father-in-law. He scammed everyone, Margaret said coolly. But the difference is, Emma didn't have a choice. You did. You chose to do business with a man you knew was unstable. You chose profit over your daughter's well-being. Now you're facing the consequences. Charles looked at Margaret with something like respect, mixed with old resentment. You always did know how to twist the knife, Margaret. I learned from watching you. The two of them stared at each other, decades of bitter history crackling in the air between them. Emma watched her parents, these two people who had created her, and then spent their whole lives using her as a weapon against each other. What do you want? Charles finally asked. Walk away, Margaret said. Go after Derek personally for the debt. Garnish his wages if he ever has wages again. Take his watch collection. I don't care. But the penthouse stays with Emma. That's non-negotiable. Charles was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned to Emma. Is this what you want? To take your mother's side against me? Emma looked at her father. She thought about all the years of feeling invisible, all the years of being treated like an investment that wasn't performing well enough, all the years of wondering if he had ever loved her at all, or if she had always just been a line item on his personal balance sheet. I'm not taking anyone's side, Dad. I'm taking my own side. For the first time in my life. Charles nodded slowly. Something in his expression shifted just slightly. It might have been disappointment. It might have been something else. You've changed, he said quietly. No. I finally stopped being afraid of you. Charles stood there for another moment looking at his daughter like he was seeing her for the first time. Then he turned back to Margaret. Fine. I'll pursue Derek directly for the debt, but I want something in return. You're not in a position to negotiate, Margaret said. Hear me out. Charles straightened his tie. I want to testify. Both women stared at him. Testify? Emma asked. At Derek's criminal trial. When the DA files charges, and they will file charges after what happened in that courtroom today, I want to be a witness for the prosecution. Charles's jaw tightened. He forged my name on financial documents. He used my firm's reputation to legitimize his fraud. He made me look like either a fool or an accomplice. The cold businessman facade cracked just slightly, revealing something underneath. Wounded pride. Rage at being played. Nobody makes Charles Ashworth look like a fool, he said quietly. I will personally ensure that Derek Harrison spends the maximum possible time in federal prison. That's not a negotiation. That's a promise. Emma looked at her father. For her entire life, she had wanted him to fight for her, to protect her, to choose her over his business interests just once. And now here he was offering exactly that. Not out of love, not out of parental devotion, but out of wounded ego and the desire for revenge. It wasn't what she had dreamed of, but it was something. "Okay," Emma said. "You can testify." Charles nodded sharply. He turned and walked back toward his Mercedes. But halfway there, he stopped and looked back at his daughter. "Emma." "Yes." He seemed to struggle with something. Words that didn't come easily to a man who had spent 70 years treating emotions like inefficiencies to be eliminated. I should have been different. When you were growing up, I know that." He paused. "It's too late to fix what's already broken. But if there's anything you need going forward, my office knows how to reach me." He got into the car. The door closed. The Mercedes pulled away and disappeared into the Manhattan traffic. Emma stood there watching him go. She didn't feel happy. She didn't feel sad. She felt strangely empty, like a wound that had finally been drained. "Are you okay?" Margaret asked softly. "I don't know." Emma turned to her mother. "That's the most he's ever said to me. In my entire life. That awkward non-apology was more than I got in 38 years. Your father was never good with emotions. Neither was I, for that matter. We were a terrible match, and we made a lot of mistakes." Margaret paused. "But the biggest mistake was letting those mistakes poison your childhood. I'm sorry, Emma. Truly." Emma looked at her mother. This fierce, brilliant, terrifying woman who had dismantled her husband in a courtroom and faced down her ex-husband on a street corner all in the same afternoon. "I used to hate you, you know, when I was younger." Margaret nodded. "I know. I don't anymore. I think I understand you now. You weren't trying to control me. You were trying to armor me. I was trying to make you strong enough to survive people like your father. Like Derek. Like all the men who see women as assets to be acquired and controlled." Margaret's voice cracked slightly. "I just went about it the wrong way. We both made mistakes." Emma reached out and took her mother's hand. "But we're here now. That's what matters." They stood there for a moment, mother and daughter holding hands on a Manhattan sidewalk, while the city rushed past them, oblivious to the small miracle of reconciliation happening in its midst. Finally, Margaret cleared her throat. "We should get to the penthouse. There's still a lot of evidence to gather before Monday." "Right." Emma started walking toward the town car. "Mom?" "Yes. Thank you. For coming. For everything." Margaret smiled. And for once, it wasn't the predatory smile of the iron verdict. It was the smile of a mother who had finally gotten her daughter back. "Always, sweetheart. Always." They got into the car. Thomas, the junior associate, closed the door behind them and got into the front passenger seat. "Where to, Ms. Ashworth?" the driver asked. "The Harrison residence on Central Park West," Margaret said. "We have some documents to collect." The car pulled away from the courthouse. Emma leaned back against the leather seat and closed her eyes. Her body ached with exhaustion. The adrenaline that had carried her through the hearing was finally fading, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness. But underneath the exhaustion was something else. Something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Her phone buzzed. Emma pulled it out and looked at the screen. It was a text from an unknown number. "This isn't over. You think you won, but you have no idea what I'm capable of. You will regret this." Emma stared at the message. Her hands started to shake. "What is it?" Margaret asked, noticing her daughter's reaction. Emma handed her the phone. Margaret read the message. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes went cold. The eyes of a predator who had just identified a threat. "Derek," Margaret said flatly. "He's not going to stop, is he?" Emma's voice was small. "Even now, even after everything, he's going to keep coming after me." Margaret handed the phone back to Emma. She pulled out her own phone and dialed a number. "David, it's Margaret Ashworth. I need you to trace a phone number for me immediately. I also need you to contact Judge Morrison's clerk and inform them that the respondent in the Harrison case has violated the restraining order. Text message threat sent within the hour." She listened for a moment. "Yes, I want him arrested tonight. Before he has time to do anything stupid. Coordinate with the NYPD and make sure they understand this is time sensitive. He's already demonstrated a willingness to commit fraud and perjury. I don't want to find out what else he's willing to do." She hung up and turned to Emma. "Derek Harrison is about to learn a very important lesson about threatening my daughter." Margaret's voice was ice. "By midnight tonight, he'll be in a holding cell. By Monday morning, the judge will add witness intimidation and restraining order violation to his list of problems. And by the time I'm done with him, he'll be lucky if he can afford a public defender." Emma looked at her mother. This woman who had walked back into her life like an avenging angel. This woman who was systematically destroying the man who had tried to destroy her. Mom. "Yes. Remind me never to make you angry." Margaret laughed. It was the first genuine laugh Emma had heard from her mother in over 20 years. "Sweetheart, you could never make me angry. Frustrated, yes. Worried, absolutely. But never angry." She reached over and squeezed Emma's hand. "You're my daughter. Protecting you isn't a burden. It's a privilege." The car turned onto Central Park West. The skyline of Manhattan glittered in the fading light. Somewhere in the city, Derek Harrison was plotting his next move, not knowing that his threatening text message had just added another year to his inevitable prison sentence. And in the back of a town car, Emma Harrison leaned against her mother's shoulder and allowed herself for the first time in 11 years to believe that everything might actually be okay. The worst was over. Or so she thought. The arrest happened faster than anyone expected. Emma was standing in the penthouse living room surrounded by boxes of documents her mother's team had been cataloging for the past 3 hours when her phone rang. It was Thomas Margaret's junior associate calling from the car downstairs. "Turn on Channel 4, he said. "Right now." Emma grabbed the remote and switched on the television. The screen filled with the image of Derek Harrison being led out of a midtown hotel in handcuffs. "Oh my God," Emma whispered. Margaret walked over and stood beside her daughter. Together they watched as Derek stumbled down the hotel steps, his hands cuffed behind his back. 2 uniformed officers gripping his arms. His face was twisted with rage. He was shouting something at the cameras, but the news had muted his audio. The headline at the bottom of the screen read, "Manhattan businessman arrested on multiple felony charges." "That was quick," Emma said. "When you threaten a witness via text message while under a restraining order, the police tend to move efficiently." Margaret's voice was calm, almost clinical. "He made it easy for them. The threat was documented, time-stamped, and traceable directly to his phone." On screen, Derek was being loaded into the back of a police cruiser. Just before he ducked inside, he looked directly at the camera. His eyes were wild, desperate, the eyes of a man watching his entire world collapse. Emma felt something she didn't expect. Not satisfaction, not relief, pity. "I almost feel sorry for him," she said quietly. Margaret looked at her daughter sharply. "Don't." I know he's awful. I know he deserves this. But..." Emma trailed off, trying to find the words. "We were married for 11 years. I loved him once. Or I thought I did. Watching him like this, it feels like watching someone finally face consequences for their actions," Margaret said firmly. "That's not tragedy, Emma. That's justice." Emma nodded, but the complicated feeling didn't go away. She had spent 11 years married to that man. 11 years of dinners and holidays and conversations. 11 years of slowly being crushed into something smaller and smaller while he grew larger and larger. And now, in less than a week, his entire empire had crumbled. It was hard to process. All of it. Her phone buzzed. Another unknown number. For a moment, Emma's heart seized with fear. Another threat. But when she looked at the screen, the message was different. "This is Natalie. I got your number from the court records. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but there's something you need to know. Can we meet?" Emma stared at the message. Derek's mistress wanted to meet with her, the woman who had been sleeping with her husband for 2 years, the woman who had testified against him just hours ago. "Who is it?" Margaret asked. "Natalie Chen, Derek's girlfriend. She wants to meet." Margaret's eyes narrowed. "Why?" "She says there's something I need to know." "It could be a trap. Derek might have put her up to it." Emma shook her head. "You didn't see her in the courtroom, Mom. She was scared. She was hurt. She found out Derek was cheating on her too. She's not his ally anymore." "That doesn't mean she's yours." Emma looked at her mother. "I need to hear what she has to say. If there's more evidence, more information that could help the case, I need to know." Margaret studied her daughter for a long moment. Something had changed in Emma over the past few days. The broken, trembling woman who had sat alone in that courtroom was transforming into someone stronger. Someone who made her own decisions. "Fine," Margaret said, "but you're not going alone. I'll have Thomas drive you, and I want you to call me immediately if anything feels wrong." "Thank you." Emma texted back, "Where do you want to meet?" The response came within seconds. "There's a coffee shop on 72nd and Columbus, the one with the green awning. I can be there in an hour." Emma typed, "I'll be there." The coffee shop was nearly empty when Emma arrived. It was that awkward time between the lunch rush and the evening crowd, when only a few scattered customers sat at tables, nursing cold drinks and staring at laptops. Emma spotted Natalie immediately. She was sitting in a corner booth, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea, her eyes darting toward the door every few seconds. When she saw Emma, her face flooded with relief and anxiety in equal measure. Emma walked over and sat down across from her. For a long moment, neither woman spoke. They just looked at each other, these two women whose lives had been twisted together by the same man. "Thank you for coming," Natalie finally said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't." Emma signaled to the waitress and ordered a coffee. "I'm still not sure why I'm here. I need to tell you some things. Things I should have told you a long time ago, but I was too afraid." Natalie's hands were shaking. Tea sloshed over the rim of her cup. "I was afraid of Derek. Afraid of what he would do if he found out I talked to you. Natalie, he's in jail. He can't hurt you anymore. You don't understand." Natalie leaned forward, her eyes intense. "Derek has friends. Powerful friends. People who helped him hide his money. People who knew what he was doing to you and didn't care. Just because he's in a cell doesn't mean he's powerless." Emma felt a chill run down her spine. "What are you talking about?" Natalie reached into her purse and pulled out a small flash drive. She placed it on the table between them. "When Derek first started seeing me, he was careful. He kept his two lives completely separate. But after a while, he got comfortable, careless. He started taking calls around me, leaving his laptop open, talking about things he shouldn't have talked about." She pushed the flash drive toward Emma. "I copied everything. Emails, bank statements, recordings of phone calls. I don't even know why I did it at first. Insurance, maybe. Or maybe I knew deep down that he would eventually do to me what he was doing to you." Emma picked up the flash drive. It felt impossibly light for something that might contain so much. "What's on here?" "Everything." Natalie's voice cracked. "The offshore accounts your mother mentioned? That's just the beginning. Derek has been laundering money for people. Bad people. Russian investors who wanted to get their money into the U.S. without questions. Chinese businessmen looking to move assets before their government noticed. Derek didn't just hide his own money. He built an entire system for hiding other people's money too." Emma stared at her. That's not just fraud. That's international money laundering." "Yes." Natalie laughed bitterly. "Your husband wasn't just a cheater and a liar, Emma. He was running a criminal enterprise. And some of the people he worked with, they're not the kind of people who forgive and forget. Emma's blood went cold. Are you saying I'm in danger? I'm saying we're both in danger. Derek knows I testified against him. He knows I have information that could make things much worse for him. And now that he's been arrested, he has nothing left to lose. But he's in jail. His friends aren't. Natalie reached across the table and grabbed Emma's hand. Listen to me. I know you have every reason to hate me. I slept with your husband. I helped him lie to you. I was part of the problem. But right now, I'm trying to help you. Take this drive to your mother. Tell her what I told you. And then both of us need to disappear for a while until the authorities figure out how deep this goes. Emma looked at the flash drive in her hand. This small piece of plastic that could blow the entire case wide open. That could turn a divorce proceeding into a federal investigation. That could put Derek Harrison away for decades instead of years. Why are you doing this? Emma asked. Why help me now? Natalie's eyes filled with tears. Because I was you. 3 years ago when I met Derek, I was just getting out of a bad relationship. I was vulnerable. He was charming. He told me everything I wanted to hear. He made me feel special, important, like I was the center of his universe. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. And then slowly he started to change. The charm turned into control. The compliments turned into criticism. He would disappear for days and then show up acting like nothing was wrong. He would get angry over tiny things and make me feel like everything was my fault. Natalie looked at Emma with an expression of shared understanding. I know what he did to you because he was starting to do it to me. I just got out before it went too far. She paused. When your mother showed me those texts to the other woman in Chicago, I finally saw him clearly. I saw what he really was. And I realized that if I didn't do something, I would end up just like you. Trapped, broken, alone. Emma felt tears burning in her own eyes. She had hated this woman for so long. Hated her for being young and beautiful and having what Emma had lost. But sitting here looking at Natalie's trembling hands and tear-stained face, Emma realized they weren't enemies. They were survivors of the same disaster. I don't hate you, Natalie. Natalie looked up, surprised. What? I should. By all rights, I should want to destroy you the way my mother destroyed Derek today. But I don't. Emma squeezed Natalie's hand. You were a victim too. You just didn't know it yet. Natalie broke down crying. She pulled her hand back and covered her face, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Emma sat quietly, letting her cry, understanding that this was probably the first time Natalie had let herself feel the full weight of what she had been through. After a few minutes, Natalie composed herself. She wiped her face with a napkin and took a deep breath. There's one more thing, Natalie said. Something that's not on the drive. What? The baby. Natalie's voice dropped to barely a whisper. Derek's baby. The one he told you about in the Miami condo. Emma's stomach clenched. The nursery furniture. The crib with the little elephants. She had managed to push that detail to the back of her mind during the chaos of the last few days. What about it? It's not mine. Emma blinked. What do you mean it's not yours? The woman in Chicago. Her name is Rachel. She's 26. Derek has been seeing her for almost a year. Natalie's voice was hollow. She's pregnant. 7 months. Derek was planning to leave both of us once the baby was born. He was going to take the hidden money move to Costa Rica, where there's no extradition, and start a new life with Rachel and the baby. Emma felt like she'd been punched in the chest. For 11 years, she had wanted children. She had endured 2 miscarriages. She had cried herself to sleep, wondering if something was wrong with her, if she was broken, if that was why Derek had grown so cold. And all along, he had been planning to have a child with someone else, planning to disappear with the money she had helped him earn, planning to leave her with nothing while he played happy family on a beach somewhere. He never wanted children with me. Emma said slowly, the realization settling like ice in her veins. He told me we couldn't afford it. He told me we weren't ready. But really, he just didn't want them with me. He didn't want anything with you except your connections and your silence, Natalie said gently. He used you, Emma. From the very beginning. Your father's business contacts your mother's reputation, your willingness to believe in him. He used all of it. Emma stood up abruptly. The coffee shop seemed too small, the walls closing in. She needed air. She needed space. She needed to process what she had just learned. I have to go. Emma, wait. I'm not angry at you. Emma grabbed the flash drive and put it in her pocket. I need to think. I'll give this to my mother. She'll know what to do with it. Be careful, Natalie said. Please. Derek has nothing left to lose now. That makes him more dangerous, not less. Emma nodded and walked out of the coffee shop. The evening air hit her face like a cold slap. She stood on the sidewalk, breathing hard, trying to make sense of everything she had just learned. Her husband hadn't just cheated on her. He hadn't just stolen from her. He had been running a criminal enterprise, laundering money for dangerous people, planning to abandon her and start a new life with another woman and their child. Everything she thought she knew about her marriage was a lie. Every memory, every moment, every whispered "I love you" had been part of a calculated performance. Emma pulled out her phone and called her mother. Margaret answered on the first ring. Emma? Are you okay? How was the meeting? Mom? Emma's voice came out strangled. We need to talk. It's worse than we thought. It's so much worse. 3 hours later, Emma sat in her mother's hotel suite surrounded by lawyers and federal agents. The flash drive had been handed over to the FBI within an hour of Emma returning from the coffee shop. The contents were even more damning than Natalie had described. Detailed records of money laundering operations dating back 5 years. Names of foreign investors who had used Derek's shell companies to move millions of dollars into the United States illegally. Communications that implicated not just Derek, but several other businessmen in his network. Mrs. Harrison, Agent Sarah Chen, said, her voice professional but not unkind. Do you have any idea where your husband might have kept additional records? Physical documents, hard drives, anything that might have been in your residence. There's a safe in his home office, Emma said. Behind the painting of the sailboat. He thought I didn't know about it, but I saw him open it once. Do you know the combination? Emma thought for a moment. He uses the same password for everything. Our wedding anniversary, June 15th. Try 06152013. Agent Chen nodded to one of her colleagues, who immediately stepped away to make a call. Margaret sat beside Emma, her hand resting on her daughter's arm. She hadn't said much since the FBI arrived. There wasn't much to say. The situation had escalated far beyond a divorce proceeding into something much larger and more dangerous. Mrs. Harrison, Agent Chen continued, I need to ask you some difficult questions. I understand you've been through a lot today, but time is critical. I understand. Ask whatever you need to ask. In your years of marriage, did you ever meet any of your husband's foreign business associates, Russian nationals, Chinese businessmen, anyone who might have seemed out of place? Emma closed her eyes, trying to remember. So many dinner parties. So many networking events. So many faces that blurred together over the years. There was a man, Emma said slowly. About 3 years ago. Derek brought him to dinner at our apartment. He introduced him as a real estate investor from Moscow. Victor something. Victor Kozlov, maybe. Agent Chen's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Can you describe this man? Tall, gray hair, very cold eyes. He didn't smile once the entire evening. Derek was different around him. Nervous, almost afraid. Agent Chen exchanged a look with another agent across the room. Mrs. Harrison, Victor Kozlov is a person of significant interest to several federal agencies. If your husband was doing business with him, this case just became much more complicated. Emma felt her mother's grip tighten on her arm. What does that mean for my daughter? Margaret asked, her voice sharp. It means we need to ensure Mrs. Harrison's safety while we investigate. Mr. Kozlov has connections to organized crime networks that don't take kindly to exposure. If Derek Harrison decides to cooperate with us to reduce his sentence, some very dangerous people might want to make sure certain information never comes to light. Emma's blood ran cold. You're saying someone might try to hurt me to keep Derek quiet? I'm saying we're going to take precautions. We'll have agents stationed outside your residence. We'll be monitoring your communications, and I strongly suggest you limit your movements for the next few weeks while we assess the threat level. Margaret stood up. My daughter is not going to live as a prisoner because her husband made stupid decisions. What are you actually doing to protect her? Everything in our power, Ms. Ashworth. I assure you. That's not good enough. Mom. Emma put her hand on her mother's arm. It's okay. They're trying to help. Margaret looked at her daughter, then at the assembled federal agents. Her jaw was tight with frustration, but she sat back down. Fine. What else do you need from us? Agent Chen pulled out a photograph and placed it on the coffee table. Do you recognize this woman? Emma looked at the photo. It showed a young woman with dark hair and a bright smile standing in front of what looked like a beachfront restaurant. That's Rachel, Emma said. Derek's other girlfriend, the one who's pregnant. Rachel Santos, 26 years old, dual citizenship U.S. and Costa Rica. Agent Chen paused. She disappeared 3 days ago. Disappeared? Her apartment in Chicago was found empty. No signs of struggle, but all her belongings were gone. Her phone has been turned off. Her bank accounts haven't been touched. Agent Chen looked at Emma intently. We believe Derek may have helped her flee the country before his arrest. Emma felt dizzy. The web of lies and betrayal kept getting larger, more tangled, more impossible to comprehend. So he got her out, Emma said slowly. He knew he was going to be caught, and he got her and the baby out first. That's our working theory. Which means somewhere out there, Derek Harrison has something worth protecting, something he values more than his freedom, more than his money, more than anything else. His child, Margaret said quietly. His legacy. Exactly. Agent Chen gathered the photograph and slipped it back into her folder. Mrs. Harrison, I know this is overwhelming, but I need you to think very carefully. In all your years with Derek, did he ever mention Costa Rica? Any properties there? Any contacts? Emma thought hard. The fog of 11 years of manipulation and gaslighting made it difficult to separate truth from fiction, real memories from implanted ones. There was something, Emma said finally. About 4 years ago, Derek came home excited about a business opportunity. Something about a development project on the Pacific coast. He said it was going to make us rich. Did he mention a specific location? Guanacaste. I remember because I had to look it up. He wanted me to sign some papers, something about the investment, but I never saw them again after that night. He said the deal fell through. Agent Chen was already typing on her phone. That's very helpful, Mrs. Harrison. Thank you. The agents began gathering their things, preparing to leave. Agent Chen handed Emma a business card. Call this number if you remember anything else, day or night, and please stay vigilant. We don't know yet what Derek might do or what his associates might do. Until we have a clearer picture, assume you're being watched. After the agents left, Emma sat in silence with her mother. The hotel suite felt too quiet, too empty, too exposed. I'm scared, Mom. Margaret put her arm around Emma's shoulders. I know, sweetheart. All I wanted was to get away from him, to start over. And now I'm in the middle of an international money laundering investigation, and there might be Russian mobsters who want me dead, and Derek has a pregnant girlfriend hiding in Costa Rica. Emma laughed bitterly. This is not how I imagined my divorce going. Nothing about this is normal, Margaret agreed. But we're going to get through it, together. I didn't come back into your life just to watch you be terrorized by the aftermath of that man's crimes. What are we going to do?" Margaret was quiet for a moment thinking. When she spoke, her voice was steel. "We're going to do what Ashworths do. We're going to fight. Derek Harrison thought he could destroy you, and instead he destroyed himself. His criminal friends think they can intimidate you into silence, but they've never dealt with me. And whoever is helping him hide in Costa Rica is going to learn that there is nowhere on this earth far enough to escape the consequences of crossing my family." Emma looked at her mother, this fierce, terrifying, wonderful woman who had walked back into her life like a force of nature. "I love you, Mom." Margaret's expression softened. "I love you too, sweetheart. Now get some rest. We have a lot of work to do tomorrow." Emma nodded and walked toward the bedroom. At the door, she paused and looked back. "Mom?" "Yes. Thank you. For everything. For being here. For fighting for me. For not giving up on me even when I gave up on myself." Margaret smiled. It was a real smile, the kind that reached her eyes and transformed her whole face. "That's what mothers do, Emma. We never stop fighting for our children, no matter how far they run, no matter how long they stay away. We never stop." Emma closed the bedroom door behind her. She lay down on the bed and stared at the ceiling, her mind racing with everything she had learned. Somewhere out there, Derek Harrison was sitting in a jail cell, his empire crumbling around him. Somewhere out there, Rachel Santos was hiding with his unborn child, waiting for a reunion that would never come. Somewhere out there, dangerous men were making plans, calculating risks, deciding whether Emma Harrison was worth silencing. But here in this hotel room, Emma felt something she hadn't felt in years. Safe, protected, loved. And for the first time, she believed she might actually survive this. 6 months passed like a slow exhale after holding breath for too long. Emma stood at the window of her new apartment in Brooklyn, watching the early morning light paint the East River gold. It was a smaller place than the penthouse on Central Park West, just 2 bedrooms, with exposed brick walls and creaky hardwood floors. But it was hers. Every piece of furniture, every painting on the wall, every coffee cup in the cabinet had been chosen by her and her alone. The penthouse had sold 3 months ago. Margaret's forensic team had discovered that Derek had taken out multiple secret loans against the property, so after paying off all the debts, Emma walked away with just under $2 million. It wasn't the fortune Derek had stolen, but it was enough. Enough to start over. Enough to breathe. Her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. A text from her mother. Verdict coming in at 10 a.m. "I'll pick you up at 9. Emma typed back, "I'll be ready." Today was the day. After 6 months of investigation, 3 grand jury hearings, and more legal proceedings than Emma could count, Derek Harrison was finally going to learn his fate. She showered and dressed carefully, choosing a deep blue dress that made her feel strong. She had lost weight over the past 6 months, but it was healthy weight loss, now the result of actually eating regular meals and taking long walks through Prospect Park instead of stress and starvation. Her hair had grown out past her shoulders, and she had stopped dyeing it the blonde that Derek had always insisted on. Her natural dark brown suited her better. Margaret's town car arrived precisely at 9. Emma slid into the back seat next to her mother. "How are you feeling?" Margaret asked. "Nervous, relieved, terrified." Emma laughed softly. "All of the above. That's normal. Today is going to be emotional no matter what happens." "Do you think he'll get the maximum sentence?" Margaret's expression was unreadable. "The prosecution has an airtight case. Between the financial evidence, Natalie's testimony, the flash drive, and his own admissions in that first hearing, Derek doesn't have much room to maneuver. But judges are unpredictable. We'll know in an hour." The car wound through Manhattan traffic toward the federal courthouse. Emma watched the city pass by, this city, where she had lost herself, and then found herself again. So much had changed since that day in courtroom 12, when she had sat alone at the defense table, convinced her life was over. She wasn't alone anymore. The courthouse was surrounded by news vans and reporters. Derek Harrison's case had become a media sensation, the kind of scandal that kept cable news pundits employed for months. A wealthy businessman brought down by his own greed. Money laundering for international criminals. A wife who had been systematically abused and then saved by her estranged mother. It had all the elements of a made-for-TV movie. Emma kept her head down as she walked through the crowd, her mother's hand firm on her elbow. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. She ignored all of it. Inside the federal courtroom was already packed. Emma spotted familiar faces in the gallery. Agent Chen from the FBI, who had become something of an ally over the past 6 months. Thomas, her mother's junior associate, who had been promoted to senior associate after his work on her case. And in the back row, almost hidden, Natalie Chen. Emma caught Natalie's eye and nodded. Natalie nodded back. They weren't friends exactly, but they had developed a strange kinship over the past months. Survivors of the same shipwreck, washed up on the same shore. At the defense table sat Derek Harrison. Emma almost didn't recognize him. The man who had once radiated arrogance and power now looked shrunken, diminished. His expensive suits had been replaced by a standard-issue prison jumpsuit. His hair, once meticulously styled, was gray and unkempt. He had lost at least 30 pounds, and not in a healthy way. When he saw Emma enter, his eyes followed her across the room. There was something in his gaze that Emma couldn't quite identify. Hatred, desperation, regret. Maybe all three. She looked away and took her seat next to her mother. "All rise," the bailiff announced. The Honorable Judge William Patterson presiding. Everyone stood. Judge Patterson entered, a stern-faced man in his 60s who had presided over some of the most high-profile financial crime cases in the Southern District of New York. He took his seat and surveyed the courtroom. "Be seated." He opened the file in front of him. "We are here for the sentencing phase in the case of United States versus Derek Michael Harrison. Mr. Harrison has been found guilty on all counts, including wire fraud, money laundering, tax evasion, witness intimidation, and violation of a restraining order." The judge looked at Derek. "Mr. Harrison, before I announce the sentence, do you have anything you wish to say to the court?" Derek stood slowly. His defense attorney, a public defender who had replaced Vincent Cole months ago, stood with him. "Yes, Your Honor." Derek's voice was hoarse. Nothing like the confident boom that had once filled boardrooms. "I would like to address my ex-wife." Judge Patterson looked at Emma. "Mrs. Harrison, do you consent to hear from the defendant?" Emma's heart pounded. Every instinct told her to say no, to refuse him this final performance. But something else, something stronger, made her nod. "Yes, Your Honor." Derek turned to face her. For a long moment, he just looked at her. This woman he had married and systematically destroyed over 11 years. "Emma." His voice cracked. "I know you hate me. You have every right to hate me. What I did to you was unforgivable. I lied. I stole. I manipulated. I made you think you were crazy when you were the sanest person in the room." He paused, swallowing hard. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve forgiveness. But I want you to know that somewhere underneath all the greed and the ego and the cruelty, there was a part of me that actually loved you. I just didn't know how to show it without destroying it." Emma listened to these words, words she had longed to hear for so many years. An acknowledgement of her pain, an admission of his wrongdoing, and she felt nothing, no satisfaction, no closure, no healing rush of vindication. Just emptiness. "Is that all, Mr. Harrison?" Judge Patterson asked. Derek nodded and sat back down. "Mrs. Harrison," the judge continued, "as the victim in this case, you have the right to make a statement before sentencing. Do you wish to exercise that right?" Emma hadn't planned to speak. She had written a victim impact statement that Margaret had submitted to the court weeks ago. But now, looking at Derek's broken figure, she felt words rising in her throat that needed to be said. "Yes, Your Honor." She stood. Her legs were shaking, but her voice was steady. "For 11 years I was married to this man. For 11 years I believed that the problems in our marriage were my fault, that I wasn't pretty enough, smart enough, successful enough, that if I just tried harder, loved better, demanded less, eventually he would treat me the way he did when we first met. Emma looked directly at Derek. I gave up my career for you. I gave up my friends. I gave up my relationship with my family. I gave up my sense of self. And in return, you gave me nothing but lies and manipulation and the constant grinding fear that I was going insane. Her voice grew stronger. When I finally worked up the courage to leave, you punished me for it. You froze my bank accounts. You changed the locks on our home. You hired lawyers to intimidate me, and then mocked me in open court for not being able to afford my own representation. Emma felt tears on her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. You didn't just steal my money, Derek. You stole my 20s and my 30s. You stole my chance to have children. You stole my belief in my own worth. And you did it all while smiling at me across the dinner table and telling me I was the love of your life. She took a breath. But here's the thing you never understood about me. I'm not weak. I was never weak. I was just kind, and you mistook kindness for weakness. You thought that because I was quiet, I had nothing to say. You thought that because I didn't fight back, I couldn't fight back. Emma smiled, and it was the smile of a woman who had walked through fire and emerged whole. You were wrong. She turned to face the judge. Your Honor, I'm not here to ask for vengeance. Vengeance won't give me back the years I lost. It won't heal the trauma or erase the nightmares. What I'm asking for is justice. Not just for me, but for every woman who has ever been controlled, manipulated, and abused by a man who thought he was untouchable. She sat down. The courtroom was completely silent. Judge Patterson cleared his throat. Thank you, Mrs. Harrison. He shuffled the papers in front of him and put on his reading glasses. Derek Michael Harrison, you have been found guilty of serious crimes that demonstrate a pattern of calculated deception, financial manipulation, and complete disregard for the law and for the people you claim to love. Your actions have caused immeasurable harm to your ex-wife, to your business associates, and to the integrity of our financial system. The judge looked directly at Derek. Additionally, evidence presented during trial revealed that you were involved in money laundering operations connected to international criminal organizations. While this court does not have jurisdiction over all aspects of that case, I have taken the full scope of your criminal conduct into account in determining an appropriate sentence. He picked up his gavel. Derek Michael Harrison, I hereby sentence you to 18 years in federal prison to be served consecutively. You will be eligible for parole consideration after serving a minimum of 12 years. Upon release, you will be subject to 5 years of supervised probation and will be permanently barred from working in any financial services capacity. The gavel came down with a crack that echoed through the silent courtroom. 18 years. Derek slumped in his chair. His attorney put a hand on his shoulder, but Derek shook it off. He was staring at the table in front of him, his face blank, his eyes empty. Court is adjourned, Judge Patterson announced. The room erupted into motion. Reporters rushed for the exits to file their stories. Lawyers gathered their papers. The bailiffs moved toward Derek to escort him back to custody. Emma sat frozen in her seat. 18 years. By the time Derek got out, she would be in her 50s. He would be in his 60s. The life he had built on lies and stolen money was over. Completely and permanently over. Margaret put her arm around Emma's shoulders. It's done, sweetheart. It's finally done. Emma nodded, but she couldn't speak. The weight of the moment was too heavy for words. As the bailiffs led Derek toward the side door, he stopped and turned to look at Emma one last time. Their eyes met across the courtroom. Emma saw something in his face that she hadn't seen before. Beneath the defeat, beneath the exhaustion, there was a flicker of something that might have been acceptance. An understanding, finally, that he had been the architect of his own destruction. Then the door closed behind him, and he was gone. 3 months later, Emma stood in her new art studio in Red Hook, surrounded by canvases and paint and light. The space had once been an old warehouse converted into artist lofts by a developer who appreciated character over efficiency. Emma had fallen in love with it the moment she walked in. The massive windows, the 20-foot ceilings, the sense of possibility that hung in the air like dust motes in sunlight. Tonight was her first gallery showing. Not in Chelsea, where the serious collectors went, but in a small gallery in Dumbo, owned by a friend of a friend. It was a modest beginning, but it was her beginning. "Emma, they're starting to arrive," called Sarah, the gallery owner, from the front room. Emma took a deep breath and looked at herself in the small mirror she had hung by the door. She was wearing a simple red dress and her grandmother's pearls. Her hair was swept back from her face. She looked for the first time in years like herself. The gallery filled slowly with people. Friends she had reconnected with after years of Derek's isolation tactics. New acquaintances from the art classes she had started taking. Her mother, elegant as always in ivory silk, holding court near the wine table. And strangers, people who had read about her story in the news and wanted to see what kind of art emerged from that kind of pain. Emma's centerpiece painting hung on the main wall. She had titled it Emergence. It showed a figure rising from darkness, arms outstretched, face lifted toward an unseen light. The colors started deep and murky at the bottom, blacks and purples and grays. But as the eye traveled upward, they transformed into golds and oranges and brilliant blazing white. "It's extraordinary," said a voice beside her. Emma turned to find an older woman studying the painting. She was well-dressed, clearly wealthy, with the kind of quiet confidence that came from decades of knowing exactly who she was. "Thank you," Emma said. "I lost my first husband when I was about your age." The woman didn't look away from the painting. "Car accident. I thought my life was over. Spent 5 years convinced I would never feel joy again." She finally turned to Emma. "Then I learned something important. Pain doesn't go away, but it changes. It becomes part of you like a bone that healed crooked. You learn to walk differently. You learn to carry it. And eventually, you learn to transform it into something beautiful." She gestured at the painting. "That's what you've done here. You've taken the worst thing that ever happened to you and turned it into art. That's not just talent, my dear. That's courage." Emma felt tears threatening again. She seemed to cry so easily these days, but they were different tears now. Healing tears instead of desperate ones. "Thank you," she said again, and this time she meant it with her whole heart. As the evening progressed, red dots appeared next to painting after painting. Sold, sold, sold. By the time the gallery began to empty, Emma had sold every piece except the centerpiece, which she had decided to keep. Some things were too precious to put a price on. Margaret found her daughter standing alone in front of Emergence, looking at it as if seeing it for the first time. "Sold out on your first show," Margaret said. "I'm proud of you, Emma. I couldn't have done any of this without you, Mom." "That's not true. You had this strength inside you all along. I just helped you find it again." Emma turned to her mother. "I've been thinking about something." "What's that?" "The settlement money. I don't need all of it. I want to do something meaningful with it. Something that helps other women who are going through what I went through." Margaret nodded slowly. "What did you have in mind?" "A foundation. For domestic abuse survivors. Legal aid counseling, career training, emergency housing. Everything I wished I had access to when I was trapped." Emma paused. "I want to call it the Ashworth Foundation, to honor the family name that I ran away from and finally came to understand." Margaret's eyes glistened. "Emma, that's... I want you to help me run it. You know the legal system better than anyone. Together we could help hundreds of women. Maybe thousands." For a moment, Margaret Ashworth, the iron verdict. The woman who had stared down Supreme Court justices and corporate titans looked like she might cry. "I would be honored," she said quietly. They stood together in front of Emma's painting, mother and daughter, Two women who had been estranged for 20 years and had found their way back to each other through fire and fury. Mom? Yes. I used to think I ruined my life by marrying Derek, that everything that happened was my fault for being stupid enough to trust him. Emma took her mother's hand. But I don't think that anymore. I think I had to go through all of it to become who I am now. The pain, the fear, the betrayal, it all led me here, to this moment, to this gallery, to you. Margaret squeezed her daughter's hand. That's called wisdom, sweetheart. It usually takes people a lot longer than 38 years to figure that out. They laughed together, a sound that echoed through the empty gallery and out into the Brooklyn night. Later that evening, as Emma locked up the gallery and prepared to walk home, she noticed a figure standing across the street. For a moment, her heart seized with old fear. Derek's friends, the Russian investors, someone coming to hurt her. But then the figure stepped into the light, and Emma saw it was Natalie Chen. Natalie. Emma walked toward her. What are you doing here? I read about your show in the paper. Natalie was holding a folded newspaper, the art section. I wanted to come, but I wasn't sure if you'd want me there. So I just watched from outside. You should have come in. I didn't feel like I deserved to. Not after everything. Emma looked at this woman who had been her husband's mistress, who had testified against him, who had risked her own safety to give Emma the evidence that put Derek away for 18 years. Natalie, how many times do I have to tell you, you were a victim too? Derek manipulated both of us. Hating you for that would be like hating myself for staying with him as long as I did. Natalie's eyes filled with tears. I just wanted you to know. I'm starting over too. I got a new job in a different field. No more finance. I'm actually going back to school for social work. I want to help people. I want to make up for everything. Emma smiled. That sounds perfect. And I wanted to thank you. For not destroying me when you had every chance. For treating me like a human being when I didn't treat you like one. Emma stepped forward and, surprising both of them, pulled Natalie into a hug. We survived, Emma whispered. That's all that matters. We survived, and now we get to live. They stood there for a moment, two women bound together by shared trauma, choosing to let that bond become something healing instead of something bitter. Then Natalie pulled away, wiped her eyes, and smiled. Your paintings are beautiful, by the way. I could see them through the window. You're really talented. Thank you. And Natalie, good luck with school. You're going to make an amazing social worker. Natalie nodded and walked away into the night. Emma watched her go, then turned and began walking home. The Brooklyn Bridge glittered in the distance. The city hummed with life around her. And somewhere in a federal prison in Pennsylvania, Derek Harrison was beginning his first of 18 years behind bars. Emma thought about everything she had lost. Her 20s, her 30s, her chance at biological children. Years of her life that she could never get back. But she also thought about everything she had gained. Her mother, her art, her self-respect, a future that belonged entirely to her. Derek Harrison had tried to destroy her. He had stolen her money, crushed her spirit, and mocked her in open court for not being able to fight back. But he had forgotten the most important thing about her. She was her mother's daughter, and Ashworth women didn't break. They bent, they struggled, they suffered in silence. But in the end, they always rose. Emma reached her apartment building and climbed the stairs to her floor. She unlocked the door and stepped into the space she had built for herself piece by piece, choice by choice. On the wall hung a small painting she had made in the first week after the trial ended. It showed a woman standing in a courtroom doorway, sunlight streaming in behind her, her face lifted toward the future. She had titled it simply, Free. Emma smiled, kicked off her shoes, and began planning tomorrow. She had a foundation to launch, art to create, a life to live, and no one would ever take that away from her again.